What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Masculinity podcast. I'm your co-host, CK.
What's going on, my people? It's your boy Anwar Ahmed, aka A Squared.
We are coming to you live from across two worlds. I am currently in Mexico, and this man is currently in Australia. And somehow we've made the timelines work. Honestly, it was I was worried for a second. I was like, uh-oh. But we made it work. We don't stop. We always bring you episodes. We committed and we're here for you always. So we got another one that we're really excited to share with you today. It comes at a very pinnacle time in society. And so we're here today to reignite the conversation around men's mental health, to honor the passing of Twitch, who recently took his life, to deepen our understandings of the experiences like Twitch taking his life, and how not just his, but all of them as they come, even though they're a similar outcome, they teach us something new about ourselves and about the world, and in many ways, the state of the world. I think there's a lot to unpack with the passing of Twitch. We want to make sure we honor him. So we're going to do so in many ways. It's going to be a great conversation. So thanks for joining us. Before we do so, you know what time it is. It's Moo
Check.
Listen, I don't know if you heard my throat there, but it kind of went sideways for a second, and my dog looked at me like she was sleeping. By the way, I just want to point out she was sleeping, and she looked at, "Are you good?"
She's like, whatever that racket is over there, keep it down.
Oh, goodness. Mood check. So we're going to do this differently today. If you've been following us for a while, you know that mood check comes at the beginning of every episode. And we do so to check in with each other, check in to see what our moods are like. We try to go deeper than good. How are you? To really amplify the necessity of this conversation. Why is it that we need to check in, and where's the value? I think as men, we don't see it, where it's more of like, what are you doing? How's work? What's your money situation like? We're so far beyond the simple check-in of like, what's your state right now? So we want to describe more to you as the audience, kind of reigniting this concept. Mood check is something we started out of the fly, but I'm going to let Anwar take that because he was actually the person who got us to do this. He had the idea. So why don't you give them more details around mood check, the creation of it, and then the importance?
Yeah, I think that, when we were coming up with this idea and we were, at the drawing board and thinking about
the good old days.
The good old days, we were thinking about, what are some things that we want this podcast to stand for, and how are ways that we can make just the show itself have that naturally, organically in it. And I think it's very common for us to hear the how are you and just brush it off. I think it's very common to mask, how we feel truly, which is another concept of our show here, where we change the C to a K to highlight the fact that we do mask. And in the masking is our moods. We mask how we feel all the time. And I think that for us, one, it was a challenge for us to get out of the saying good, right? And actually showing an example of what going beyond good sounds like, And then the other thing is it allows for the audience to, every time they hear us have a mood check, to hear a different way about going about it. Sometimes we use words to describe the sensations that we're feeling. Sometimes we're just brutally honest about how we're feeling. Sometimes we say we're just good, and the other one challenges us and goes, but how are you really doing? Right. And these are all examples of what we think a mood check should represent, is this idea and curiosity to not just ask the question and expect just good, but to dig deeper and want a bigger answer, want to have a deeper understanding of how the person's genuinely doing. I was, just reflecting with a friend the other day, and we are talking about, there's people who are naturally, let's say, assertive, and then there's people who are naturally a little bit more passive, right? And if somebody who's assertive is expecting somebody who's passive to let them know, because they would let them know, like if they were going through something, they would be assertive and they would let them know, right? We're not all the same, right? So sometimes somebody who's passive might say, I'm good. And that is like as much as they can give you at the time. They're not going to keep going unless you pry a little bit more, right? And so instead of generalizing how, like if they were good, they would tell me, instead of being in that mentality, which is a very easy place to be in. Well, I asked you how you're doing. You said you're fine. So, I let it go. Is how can we not only want a better answer from our peers and our friends and our family, but also understand the characteristic of that person. Are they someone who would willingly share something, or are they someone who needs a double question? Are they somebody who, what are we doing to make sure that we're actually putting them in the best position? We call that holding space. Sometimes we call that creating comfort. What are we doing to make sure that the arena in which we're asking these people, how are you doing, is conducive of hearing some information that maybe isn't pleasant? How are we ready for that? Because if you ask somebody how are you doing on the fly, I'm probably not going to give you much. You seem like you're in a rush. That seemed pretty ingenuine. I don't think you actually care. I'm not going to offload a bunch of stuff on you right now. But if you show that people that there's time and there's grace for the question and there's a genuine curiosity about answering that question, it can open up a lot more, and it can offer a bit more of a deeper answer and a deeper reflection. And so I really like this segment of the show because I think it's a very important segment. And I think that the mood check stands for so much. But I do still think that we're underutilizing it. I don't think that we're, even though we do it every single episode, it's what this Twitch thing has kind of taught me is that there's also a whole audience that wasn't maybe potentially being checked up on, and that's these high functioning people, right? Mm-hmm. This high functioning, strong individuals aren't getting checked up on because either A, they're maybe the ones doing all the checking in, and they're checking in on other people and no one's checking in on them, or it just they don't look like what we've classified as depressed or what we've classified as people who need help.
Right.
We almost look for people who are hurt to check on, when you scan a room, you're not the happy-go-lucky person in the corner is the one you're probably going to skip, right? You're going to go, that person in the corner looks sad, I'm going to go check up on them, right? But how are we doing a better job of changing our lens of what we perceive to be depressed, because I think Twitch, the biggest thing I've learned in this example is that he didn't look the part.
Yeah, the double ask gets me every time, even as somebody who considers himself high functioning, shows up in the world constantly. Obviously I'm running a business in front of the eyes of whoever across the world, and this podcast, I consider myself similar, high functioning, constantly trying to, show up my best, be my best, and not be perceived as struggling. And so the truth of it is that we all have our own struggles each and every day. And there are things that stress us out and bother us and worry us and bring up fear and insecurities. All these things are real. So the double ask really shakes me up sometimes, which is one of the reasons I love our mood check and why I'm grateful that we stuck with it. I remember, like you said, the creation, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. And I think I remember I wasn't 100% sold on it. I was like, okay, seems like maybe unnecessary. Let's just, have the conversations and let's talk about the topics. But as time has passed, it has integrated itself into my own life in many different ways. And it reminds me of the documentary by Roman Kemp. I think it's called The Silent Emergency. And it's a UK-based movie or documentary about men's mental health and suicide. And in that movie, he stressed the importance of the double ask in all of his spaces because he lost a friend who was similar to Twitch, high functioning, no clue, happy guy, always showing up, always in this space. You don't check on those people. And you definitely don't double ask, right? It's not a double ask. How are you? I'm doing really good, thanks. And you're like, oh, okay, there's no reason to double ask. It's interesting. And so I really appreciate that you just gave that information because it gives me good context now too. I'm learning with you as we go through these experiences. And that's why we mentioned at the beginning the importance of understanding that every single one of these situations is going to teach us something different. It's going to provide a different value point for us. And it's not to be morbid about the situation. It's that this is offering us something. This was not in our control, right? We don't know Twitch personally. It came as a very big shock to the world, including the people he was close to. And it's horrible. It's so upsetting. And at the same time, how are we evaluating it? Are we evaluating it? Are we opening ourselves up to being able to have a conversation about it so that we can see if something different comes up? Because he did it differently than a lot of people did. And He showed up in the world different than a lot of other people we know showed up. So it's completely different. So it asks for a different conversation, which comes right back to the mood check.
And it's one other thing I wanted to add there with the mood check is sometimes we can be double asking, right? Like even if we do a good job of doing a mood check, there is a level of humility and vulnerability that you need in order to share what you're really going through. I think that like a mood check is like the first line of defense. And we hope we can continue to get more mood checks, and hopefully we can get more information, and we can hopefully help correct some of that information if it's leading down a bad path. But there's also just, to all the men out there, it's just like we also have to have some level of humility to want to share what's going on. Like I ache for the people who feel like they were doing mood checks as best as they could, checking in on people, and they just were not getting information. They just were not receiving anything that either led them to believe that something was wrong or could lend to potentially getting this person help. And I know that I'm guilty as charged for saying I'm good and like and holding the line. You could ask me 4 or 5, 10 times, I'm good. And I think that there's a bigger conversation there, right? Like, why are we so resistant, even though you're 100% not good?
Yeah.
But regardless of how many times you're asked, you hold that line, when you hold it so true to, like, so solid, and I think it speaks to what you just kind of a little bit alluded to there, as this idea of like, how does bringing these walls down make me look?
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is an interesting conversation, and definitely a bigger conversation. But yes, I think the mood check is a great start. At least it opens the door to an opportunity for some vulnerability.
And that's why I think we stress it every week, and why I think I've grown to appreciate it is because we don't speak from a position of coming on here, doing the mood check and saying we do that 24/7, 365 everywhere we go. We don't answer the question always in that way. Like there's so many. I just had an encounter with somebody random and they're like, how are you? And I just said, I'm good. Like naturally you're going to have the spaces where it's not like this space to open up or to share something vulnerable. Maybe it's an acquaintance or, not a super close friend, or maybe it's a family member that you're worried about. Like there's, I don't know, there's so many different scenarios where we understand on a deep level that mood check is not going to be applied. So to get rid of any nuance, right? Like one, it's not always applicable and that can be okay. But two, what's the and both, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that it is an and both. There are moments where I cannot, and there are moments where I can, and can I understand and utilize both spaces? That's the importance. And I think that's really where some of the missing links are. This brings us to our first question. What we want to do here today, we want to break down some questions around some of the common things that are being said around vulnerability, around mental health in general. We want to utilize those questions as personal experience opportunities to share with you what we move through. So this brings us to the first question, which is, why are men struggling to talk? Which is the grander narrative. Why won't men open up? Why are men struggling to talk? And we can talk at the question, but we want to talk with the question. So I'll speak first in that the question comes at me of like, did I struggle to talk? And if I did, why? And coming back to like the right spaces, right? Like the acquaintances, the friends that aren't that close, maybe the friends that are close, but you don't really have that kind of relationship. And the friends that are super close, the family members, like there's a myriad of types of people that you are in your spaces with. And the vulnerability conversation really came in hot and told me to, at least it felt like, talk to everyone. Like always be sharing. Like don't just say good to, like make sure you say something bigger than good to whoever's asking, right? Someone asks you how you are, tell them.
Right? So exaggerate, make it, embellish it a little bit.
Yeah. So I found myself trying to reach for information when I was talking to people I didn't know. And sometimes I did. Sometimes I would, have a call with someone or not really be that close. And I could feel this tenseness in me to do what the narrative said, which is to share more than just good, give them more. And that was a mistake I made, I think, in many ways. I added a lot of pressure to myself to have to do so. So it almost kind of made me more closed because of this like inner conflict, this pressure that I felt from society, from people, from the narrative. And then on the grander scale, did I struggle to talk? Yes. And I struggled to talk because I believed I could do it on my own. That was number one. I believed that I don't need to talk about it because just give me an hour and I got it. Or give me 5 minutes and I got it. Or just let me, whatever it is. So I didn't talk because I really believed that I could. So sure enough, I found a way and I did. But I didn't know what I was doing to myself in that process. So that's the interesting part to reflect on. And maybe that'll come out later. Just more of like the suppression and repression of your actual experience. But I struggled to talk because I don't know for sure if I felt like it was weak. I think that was a narrative that existed and still does, but I don't know if I was conscious of it. Like, I don't know if I was actually preventing myself from speaking because I thought that I would be seen as weak. Mm-hmm. So part of me actually believes that maybe that was something that was forced upon me as a man to try and believe and to try to see, but I don't feel like I ever got that treatment. No one ever told me that. Like, I think maybe, the you're a pussy narrative growing up could have done so. That's a possibility, but I think that I never really felt that way. So it wasn't because of that. I think that, it really, really boiled down to the fact that I really thought I could just move through it. I was a high functioning person. I was capable of what I believed anything. I was strong enough. I felt like I was not incapable of moving through hardship. I wanted to be resilient and determined and committed and strong and all of the things. I want to be a leader. And it felt like there wasn't room for any of that if I was those things. So I think it was very complex in the sense of why I did not talk. It wasn't just, I don't want to be vulnerable or I don't want to share the depth of me. No, I don't need to because I got it. Mm-hmm. I think that was my grander narrative.
Sorry, I was just adjusting there, but you can keep going. I know I raised my microphone, but
yeah, you're good. And it reminds me of what I was just trying to bring up was the space, right? I think another narrative that I just came to was that I didn't feel like I had the space. And this is why like men's groups and men's community is such a thriving thing right now, because that's the space. But I will be honest in that it didn't matter if the space presented itself or not. In the experiences I've had of, depression, suicidal ideation, really just, down and beat up moments, I don't think it would have mattered at the time because, coming back to the first narrative, I don't need it. I got it. Give me an hour and I'll figure it out, And so the men's community was a space and I didn't utilize it. Not one bit. I also didn't utilize the people I knew I could. And I didn't do that because that's a really good question. I've spoken about that to you actually before about like, I didn't reach out to friends that I had. I knew I had people and I still didn't. I don't think I've dissected that enough to fully understand what got in my way. I think I could make up like it was, I don't want to be a burden or I don't want to bother them or it's not important, but that doesn't seem right to me. It feels like there's got to be more there. Mm-hmm. So that sounds to me like I have some discovery to go into there because nothing's really coming to me in this moment. I just knew I didn't. And to be radically honest, I knew I was choosing not to. Like I knew it was a choice.
Mm. So you're fully conscious that you weren't using your environment to better the situation.
Yeah. 100%. So, okay, well then maybe there it is.
Lone wolf mentality. It sounds like a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of lone wolf. And also this is in a weird way, as I've worked through a lot of my coping mechanisms and like strategies I've used over the course of my life, I didn't have to face it.
What do you mean by that?
If I talked about it, I would have to face it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
If I don't talk about it, I don't have to face it. So I was running. There it is. The goosebumps ran through my body. We found it. I didn't talk because that means I had to actually walk myself towards the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was way scarier than trying to be like a radical lone wolf who could just figure it the fuck out. Yeah. That's the shit right there, isn't it? Damn.
We're just watching you unpack that in real time is like an exercise in itself, you know. Just watching you kind of decode like all of the things that you're doing subconsciously that are leading to real conscious results, you know. And I don't think that we do this enough, you know. This is such a simple question. Why are men struggling to talk? It's like such a simple question. We're doing it all the time. And yet watching you go through that was just like almost like you were revisiting those feelings for the first time, you know, understanding it for the first time, which is crazy. Because if you think about it and you think about how long you might have been in a, you know, in a rut with your mental health, for you to be revisiting what you were avoiding for the first time in this moment is just like such a telling experience, right? Like it's such an all consuming headspace when you're in that mental health like challenge and struggle. And yet a simple question like, why aren't you talking, takes such a long time to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that just like, it just goes to show you how like sometimes how deep rooted some of this subconscious stuff is, you know, because it just feels like there's just more reasons to not talk than to talk, you know. Even if you think about it for a second, it's like, okay. And even some of the reasons you were like, you had reasons that weren't even your reasons. And you were like, but they existed, they were floating around. Yeah. And you're literally, there was the 4 reasons that you had for yourself. And then you were like, there's the weak one as well. But I don't know if that one was for me. It's almost like there's this bullet point of all these reasons why you shouldn't be talking. And like 4 of them apply to you. 3 of them didn't, but you were conscious of all of them.
Yeah.
Like, but the other equation is just talk. Like the other side of that line is just to talk. Right.
Right.
And I can resonate with a lot of the things that you said there. You know, a lot of the fundamental points that you had made were definitely things that I felt as well. And in terms of my challenges with not wanting to speak out, I think the one that I will say was the most like pivotal for me was my perception of myself and the language that I needed to use. You know, like I always felt like I was kind of like, you know, the older sibling, the pioneer, the leader, you know, I always felt like these were some of the qualities that I was chasing. You know, I wanted to be the captain. I wanted to be someone who was, you know, respected, idolized, you know, and in many ways I had, you know, carved out small pockets of leadership within my life, you know, where people looked up to me in terms of like a friendship or advice or, you know, responsibilities and things like that, you know, and just, you know, I kind of grew up really fast. At 18, I was kind of, you know, injected into an adult life. And so it felt like, okay, I got to carry this torch now. You know, you're an adult now, you know, you got to do this, you know, and what do adults do? Adults, they take care of things. They don't really, I've never seen my parents like, you know, look around and ask questions and struggle or try to be like, hey, I don't know what to do next, or show any sign of like, you know, even though we were poor and stuff like that, there was like a rock to them, right? Like there was a level of like, you looked at your parents and they were like, oh, those people don't fold. Like they don't tell you what's going on. They just kind of hold the line, right? So for me at 18,
that's the contrast of the year. Please keep going. Oh my goodness.
I just think for me, it just felt like, okay, you're an adult now. And what comes with adults, they don't fold. You know, adults have their shit together. Adults know what they're doing. You know, and it was almost like I took on titles a little bit too early. And therefore, when problems came, I was like, oh, you're not a kid, you're an adult. So how would an adult handle this? You know, and a lot of the times that felt like you know, I'm not going to go to my friends and be like, hey, I got adult problems. You're still in your youth. You're still being a kid. So it's like, I felt almost like we had different problems, you know? And so that's where I resonate with you in terms of like, I guess I'll figure it out. I figured everything else out. I'm going to have to figure this out, you know? And it was almost like I had built the wrong foundation for life, you know, too early. Like at a young age, at 18, when I still had so much to learn, I still should have been very curious. I started entering in this, like, I'm an expert life, you know, like I got to be an expert, and everything that wasn't expert felt like I needed to like shut up and figure it out until they can't know you're not an expert. They can't know you can't hold this responsibility, you know? So I felt like a lot of the times for me, my silence was more in this idea that I had a perception of myself that I needed to obtain or maintain, I should say. And talking about struggling with that image just didn't make sense, you know, because that's the image I have, and that's the image I'm trying to portray. And that's the image that I like, you know, like that's who I am, is I'm a high functioning, high responsible adult child.
Adult, yeah.
And so
that adult narrative hits home hard. Like, well, first of all, I haven't even considered that as a narrative to exist in my arena. I've known that I've obviously been influenced by parents. Everyone knows that. But that part like strikes, because how parents are just trying to make sure that they are seen in like a good light. So they just, when we're not struggling, we're not going through anything, like we got this, we'll figure it out, like to not create any more stress, right? In the family, they don't want the children to be worried. And then to not, it has never really clicked that desire to look strong and to be perceived as a great parent always, and always to like, you know, probably suppress in many ways the struggle or hide the struggle so children don't see it, is actually doing us a disservice, and is causing us to see as adults as, well, you don't share then, you don't struggle then. So if you're struggling, something might be wrong with you. So, you know, like get rid of it. That's well said. That is great reflection. And for any parent that's listening too, like to be able to share with your child that you are having a difficult time. I already feel resistance. I don't have a child. I can feel that resistance. I don't want to do that, because then what? That might mean that, well, maybe they have to be emotionally responsible for me in some weird way, which I don't want. Or they might feel like they have to take care of me, or they might see me, you know, as incapable or not able to support them or help them. I get it. Like there's a lot of pressure there. And yet still, it is so much more valuable to share that you're moving through something at obviously an intellectual level that they can understand, so that they know that it's okay to be able to go through those spaces and to see you come out of them, even though you had, like, that would be the grander narrative, but that's not the common narrative. That's not common. Wild.
And even, you know, to bring it back to, you know, masculinity and men, even more so from the father, you know, if there was some vulnerability to be shown in the home, or a little bit of emotion, or a little bit of genuine honesty, sometimes I would argue that it would mainly come from like the mother, you know, and the dad would hold the post, you know, like the dad will show that like, we got this, you know, for sure. You know, even if we're wavering, it's like maybe you'd see some emotion from, you know, your mother, or you would see some emotion from the, you know, the female figure in your life side. But the father, no way, you know, like it's almost like it's almost like we're in a place where it's like, we're still really awkward when we see men cry. We're still very awkward when we see men cry. There's like something about it that just is still, you know, and it's just so deeply rooted in us that looks weird, you know, like a man crying. There's just something about that image that's still not fully resonating, right? And so I think that if just people could understand that, like, if a man crying still weirdly has some sort of like stigmatism to it, right? Which is just like a pure expression of frustration or pain or like whatever someone is going through. And we just are choosing to not engage in that because of some sort of stigmatism. And then we're also choosing to not engage in speaking about it because without the crying, it's still just a verbal expression of something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I just think that and the hard part here, my brother, is the fact that I just don't know the answer to how to get men, like to just,
Mm-hmm.
and I can feel the frustration from the women's side as well. Like they're like, we don't care if you cry. I get it. You probably don't. And I know you genuinely probably don't. You would rather have, like Patty said, someone cry on your shoulder than have to carry his coffin the next week. Like I know deep down that is probably true. But there is a narrative out there that is it just exists. And like we as men need to start looking past it. Like it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. And I don't know the answers. And I know that this is starting to become real frustrating for people because it really does feel like we're on rinse and repeat here with suicide. Like somebody dies. We have the almost like we could just carbon copy the templates and just condolences. This is really sad. Gone too soon. I can't believe it. Shock. Like we're just so used to this idea of somebody committing suicide and we're just not getting more comfortable with creating the arenas that would prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
I even still, in a weird way, call this a hot take. I think that like when people see a bunch of men doing men's work together, it's still looked at as weird.
Yes.
Like it's still
the hilarious narrative is that men will start a podcast before they talk about their problems. Like there's so many that are like, we want you to talk, but when you go and do it, why are you doing that? Like it's where there's a questioning.
Mm-hmm. And you're seeing online too. It's just like, there's just these weird things that come up, right? It's like you see these things that there's haters online all the time. It's fine. It's understandable. Like, that's just how the world is. There's just people that are going to hate, but there's literally like, I've seen people be like, oh, men talking about mental health on podcasts, ick. Like that's like gross. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like when you hear these things, it's like, this doesn't fuel the narrative of a healthy mental space, like
right.
By making that statement, you are contributing to the men don't cry comments. You are contributing to the, men shouldn't cry. Sorry. Man up. Like you're still in your own way contributing to all those conversations. Cause every time as men, we step into a light of trying to prevent something like this happening, there's comments like that come back, and it's frustrating to hear, right? Like it's frustrating to listen to. It's annoying. And what I'm starting to realize is that like there's this really like toxic positivity / ignorance to the idea of how real something is, how real this problem is. And when you said earlier in the conversation that there's something that you can learn from these unfortunate acts, I think the one big one that was missing, and I really, really hope we can start changing the narrative on all of this mental health stuff, is the fact that on the surface, this man had everything you think someone would want, and still we got the same outcome. 4 million followers, charisma, personality, talent, friends, a beautiful family, 3 kids. His last post on IG was him and his wife dancing in front of a Christmas tree. The post before that was him and his wife celebrating a 9-year anniversary. He is regarded as someone who brought joy, positivity, and passion to everything he touched. And we got this outcome. Yet we want to talk about men on a podcast talking about their feelings as icks and this and that. That's where we're at. That's what we want to continue to push forward. What are we doing? Like, I don't understand like what we're doing here. What example are you looking for? Because this is not a friend said this to me best. I called them after kind of this conversation, and he said it to me best. He said, you can't just in a positive way outthink cancer. We don't treat it like, oh, you have cancer, just meditate your way out of it. This is an illness. It's an illness. This is not how does your life look like? Just think positively about it, show gratitude. This is an illness. You wouldn't speak about somebody who is sick in that manner. You wouldn't say, hey, think your way through it. There's levels to this mental health. There's levels to the depths of which one can go in their mind. And by the response online, you can just tell that people just think like it's a lifestyle thing. Oh, he had it all. Why would he do that? He had kids. Let's do the math. Let's put the math together. This isn't a lifestyle thing. This isn't if you have it all, you can't feel it. If you shouldn't be committing suicide if you have everything. This is a illness. It is killing men predominantly. And we got some real serious stigmas that we need to break. And instead of saying, gone too soon, or this is sad, or putting out all these empty comments in messages, ask yourself, what am I saying, or how am I projecting information that might be contributing to someone not telling me how they feel? Because if you've contributed to any kind of like, I only want a man who's strong, or I only want, if you are saying some of those things, men are just going to continue going down that route, because they're going to feel like there's no way out. And that's not everybody. And I know that. And I genuinely believe that the world's in a place where, they want men to be more vulnerable. I genuinely believe that. I just don't think our actions always are in line with that. Mm-hmm. Because when you see an attempt of something like a group of men getting, doing breath work together, or social work, or doing whatever they're going to do, you see how people respond. And it's frustrating to watch.
Mm-hmm. The question we were going to move on to was, what are the stigmas, or why is it that men's mental health is stigmatized? I mean, you just spoke actual facts and beauty, in also in a weird way, to the fact that this is why. Like, here it is front and center. This is why it's stigmatized. You still don't not understand? Well, instead of writing those comments, why don't you just ask? Why don't you just get curious and listen? Right? That's why. In so many different ways. This is a conversation that we have had many times on this podcast. There have been men in our personal lives that we've lost, and there are men in the grander scale of things that we have lost in regards to Twitch. And Twitch in many ways reminds me of Robin Williams. It's very similar. It feels like experience of just like, no, you can't make that make sense to me. And so what we're doing again here is reminding ourselves that the conversation is not done. We're not over with it. It's not going anywhere. And I think when we enter spaces like this, sometimes when a narrative gets too big, it's as if the other side needs to get bigger first in order for us to make any change. So as I hear you speak, I can hear all of the other, podcasts or people, I'll withhold names out there, that are kind of battling against this narrative that we're trying to support, which is to be able to speak and to be able to express ourselves and be authentic and support our own mental health through other people and through the world around us, and to feel safe doing so and trusting doing so. There are a lot of people in the world who are battling that and making it seem like that's the wrong decision. So it's working. in that weird way, that this message is getting louder, therefore they need to get louder, and that's okay. It's a necessity, and we're going to be here every episode making this conversation louder and louder, because this one is in support of saving fucking lives, of preventing that decision, so we don't have to go there anymore, so that it doesn't matter what they look like or what they're doing in their lives. We're still having the conversations with them, which is something that you attested to so like eye-openingly, which is, it really shouldn't be that way. But the question that you posed in your beautiful post on Instagram was, why are we only checking in on the people who are struggling and not checking in with our friends who are high functioning, who are doing well? Why do we put up a block? Why do we not care as much, or not, maybe not even care as much? It's not intentional. Just what is the block there, right? Because as we've been pointed out many times, and I don't think I need to go farther than Twitch and Robin Williams to identify the fact that it is just as important to go into those spaces. So I'll speak to that myself, in that I think that there is a obviousness to someone who is struggling, right? It's a very obvious, like, okay, you're not doing well, like, you can talk to me, open up, like, then I'll enter that space. But if a high functioning person were to tell me, oh, you're not doing good, well, then it's almost like, well, what hope does any of us have?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Which is a weird way I've never really thought about that before, but not asking someone who maybe I look up to, or is doing really well as a friend, like, I'm like, yeah, you're killing it, to, it's almost like it's relatable, but it's also like, shit, you didn't find out a way out either.
Mm-hmm. Like, do superheroes deal with mental health?
Right. And again, like, the obviousness of it all is like, yeah, you're struggling, so of course I'm going to open up. You're not struggling, or perceivably you're not struggling, so I'm not going to engage with that. So that's, I think, number one for me, why I don't ask my high functioning friends really in depthly of like, how are you really doing? But I think it's going to come back to, you know, mirroring back to me, my own experience. If I double ask you and then you start to tell me about your struggles, well, one, obviously didn't expect it, but two, it might ask me to face mine, because I'm asking you to. So how hypocritical would be for me to not share that too. So it's almost as if like I make it about myself. Mm-hmm. Unknowingly, I'm still in self-protection. I'm still trying to make sure I don't have to talk. So I'm not going to ask you.
And to add to that, because you're on a great point. We often say, like, one of the best caveats for being vulnerable or getting vulnerability out of somebody is to be vulnerable yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Great wraparound. That's exactly it.
I mean,
to lead the way. Yeah.
I mean, the people that I've gotten who have been vulnerable to me, when I ask myself, why do people open up to me? You know, like randomly, you know, I'll meet a stranger and all of a sudden they'll open up to me, and I'm realizing that I am being vulnerable to them, and therefore they're being vulnerable to me. There's this yin and yang there, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and when I think about, you know, women, it's like they always have this open door of like, I'm being vulnerable to you, you're being vulnerable to me. It's almost like it's almost just always available, right? Like, it's almost like, hey, there's no reason why you shouldn't have been able to tell me what's going on. I've been telling you what's been going on for like weeks. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where for men, it's like, it's almost like a wall with a wall, right? So it's like, how do we expect to get vulnerability out if we're not willing to be vulnerable ourselves, right? So if you have two people who come together who are like, they're both, I'm good guys, well, obviously no conversation's going down.
Right.
So I just thought that was you're ultimately saying that, but I just wanted to add that language there. But
no, it's good though, because I don't know if we've had conversations strictly towards it, but it's like, if you are someone who feels willing, then like, get on, then die on that sword. Like, get in there, share, open up, like do that, because you are the influence for hundreds, thousands of people who don't feel safe doing it, who feel like it's, you know, the most critical thing that they could do, who absolutely reject it, who say, fuck no, I'm not sharing anything with you. Like it doesn't put you on a pedestal. It just puts you, you know, 2 steps ahead. And you would want them to come up with you right? Like we're walking each other through the dark, but I have a little light up here. Like, can you see it? And I only have that light if I share, right? Like if I open up and I lead that way, you can see that light and you can come with me. Can we see it that way? And it reminds me of how I even got to the position I am in now. I became so much more vulnerable in my life. And I'm going to use the word truthful from Aubrey Marcus. If you've ever followed anything of Aubrey Marcus, that man is some of the most radically fucking honest things I have ever heard in my entire life. And in each one of the things that I've learned through the process and I continue to learn, I'm like, wait, you can talk about that? Wait a second. I don't understand. That's not okay. You don't get to talk about that shit. No way. What was happening here? So it shows me, one, how like vulnerability and truth are so shocking to culture, right? Truth has been obviously demonized. We know this. And so, but to focus on my experience, he led the way for me. He showed me that it was possible to do it and still be okay. And that was my fear. If I share, if I open up, if I start to get into the nitty gritty of it all, whether it's a public platform or a person, like I'm not going to be okay. Something is not going to be okay here. But he's doing it on a very large platform. And in many ways, I see like his business could be threatened. His relationship could be threatened. His sanity could be threatened. And yet it's still there and he's still showing up and he's still okay. And he has hard shit and he shares it and he's still okay. And he keeps proving that you can do this and try this and be okay. Man was poly for how long? And it absolutely destroyed him. I can't honestly say I've ever considered the possibility of even attempting that until him, because he shared his experience. And so it was so eye-opening for me in this moment, but also just in my experience of like, it's not always you and that's okay, but can you pay attention to the ones who are like so radically honest and just use that as your, in the way I did, my almost approval. Like I got approval from them to do so. You know what a really hilarious example is? It's not vulnerability related, but you know this new AI generator that came out? Where you're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the first time that I saw it was through Aubrey, right? So he put it out and I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. The hell is this thing? That's hella cool. So I couldn't find it. So I Googled it and I found it. I found the app and I'm like, okay, download the app and I'm tinkering with it. But then I went back to his post and I went into the comments and he got absolutely destroyed for this thing. They lit him up for making that decision. And I was so beside myself. I was like, oh, no, screw it. I'm not doing it. But then there was still this weird urge. Like, I want to, though. Like, what's the problem? Like, I don't understand why I'm making this a problem. But it was because I was in this, like, he led the way, and then he got absolutely lit on fire. So I'm like, there's no way he's okay. I'm not doing that. So then I worked through some of my narratives. And what I'm getting at here is that I did end up doing it only because he did keep posting other things. He was okay. And he did it. I didn't feel like I had permission until he did. So it just opens up the door, I think, in this conversation to be that leader if you can, and to know that the influence that you make is actually so much more powerful than you might see on the front side of things. But in many ways, to many people, for you, they're Aubrey Marcus. Like, yeah, I'll share shit about me. That's just what I do. I'd love if you would, but I'm not going to force you, but I'll model it. I'll lead the way. I definitely feel like we got off topic with the question, but I like where we went.
No, I really like where you went. I think that, you speak to what this platform is about, right? In many ways, we're trying to lead the way, in this conversation and really instill ourselves in a place where, like, the thing that I love about our podcast is it's extremely authentic, because we're guys on a journey, like we really believe in the 75% rule. We're like on our way. Like we are literally processing and navigating new things every single day about our masculinity, about our mental health, about the challenges that we face. And we still show up to this podcast and try to, in real time, unpackage that for the audience, right? To show you guys there's times where we've gone on podcasts and I read back and I'm like, I don't know what I was saying there. Like, I don't know. My feelings aren't like, they're not coming out as clear as I wanted to, but it's a part of the process, you know, and we're trying to show that it's not about having the right words. It's not about it's not about being perfect. You know, it's not about always being like, okay, my feelings are 100% fleshed out. I know exactly what feeling that is. I know exactly what I want to do with it. You know, it's about having a raw conversation with a raw emotion and unpacking it, and maybe attaching it to another part of your life or a perception that you have or an experience that you're having, you know. I think what you talked about there with the AI bot is you're really speaking to fear of judgment, you know? And I think really what we as men are struggling with is the fear of judgment about our masculinity. If X happens, right? If I do this, there's a massive fear of judgment that I won't be considered masculine. And
what kind of man will I be viewed as? Yep.
What kind of man am I, right? And then we have this idea of what a man is, like just it feels black and white, you know, of masculinity. And there's all these pillars. And, you know, sometimes it feels like it's laid out like a warrior, and we feel like a gardener. And it's hard for us to process, you know, because we so badly want to be a warrior, but maybe our makeup is gardener. You know, that doesn't mean you can't go and get warrior skills, right? But I think what's happening is sometimes we're dying trying to become a warrior when we just don't, one, have the right tools to become it, or we haven't been shown, right? Imagine someone who had a very solid father figure in their household, a father that was a warrior, right? And then this child is born, and it's like, yeah, that child is probably going to get a firsthand example of what warrior looks like straight from the master. You know, you're going to learn exactly what it feels like to be a warrior. Then there's all these people who grew up with no fathers, and yet they're being held to the same standard of trying to become a warrior, but they don't have the same master teaching them. Some of them are teaching them on their own. Some of them are being taught through, you know, women, right? And so they learn all these skills about being a gardener, and you're the best gardener ever, and you feel good about yourself, and you go into the world and you're like, you got no warrior in you? Like, what's going on here, bro? You have no masculine qualities at all? And you're like, oh, well, I wasn't taught those qualities. What do I need to learn? It's like, oh, well, you're not even a man then, you know? Like, but
I'm not going to teach you. You're just less than.
You're just less than, you know? And then God forbid you're already feeling that way, and then you have a mental health bout. Say you're already feeling insecure about being masculine, and then all of a sudden now things are happening in your life that are leading to you wanting to share, and you're like, well, that's going to make me feel even less masculine than I already feel. So screw that. Yeah. I'm already fighting this uphill battle of trying to prove that I am, right? And so in a lot of ways, you kind of really highlighted there, you know, one, the challenge of fear of judgment of our masculinity. Two, this very black and white definition of what masculinity is. And, you know, and three, the one thing that you didn't say it, but it came to me as you were speaking, is the question we asked earlier was, why are men struggling to talk? I thought about that. I went, okay, you know, we're stuck on that question. We're trying to figure that out. Then you went on this, you know, little segment about vulnerability. It just dawned on me. Maybe men aren't talking because other men aren't showing vulnerability for them to talk too. You know, when I think about all the successful conversations that I've had, I've given a little bit to get a little bit, right? I've been vulnerable. Someone's been vulnerable to me. So let's say you wanted to talk, but none of your friends ever act vulnerable to you. Therefore, you never feel like you have an opportunity to speak about what you're going through, you know? So is it maybe men are struggling to talk, not all because of some of the stereotypes, but also because most men open up to women and not other men? What does a world look like where men are being vulnerable to other men about real shit? I think that conversation is worth exploring.
Mm-hmm.
Because sure, I can be vulnerable to you and you can be vulnerable to me. And we've created this great relationship. But what if you're in a friend group right now and none of your friends ever show you vulnerability ever? So therefore you go, I can't show that either then. And you're all just looking for, one person to let their guard down, for you to let your guard down. Right? And every time you open up to a woman. When men are being vulnerable, let's say, for example, they open up to a woman, but then they don't feel the full, complete feeling because they're actually struggling with masculinity problems.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to have a masculine conversation. Like they want to hear from another man, like, hey, dude, it's all good. I go through that exact same thing. Mm-hmm. It almost kind of feels like, to me, I remember telling my therapist, I don't want to just vent. Venting helps. And it really helped in the beginning of my mental health struggle, just getting it off my chest. I felt like there was a deep breath. But then it's like, now what?
Yeah.
I've got it off my chest. It feels great, but now what? And I feel like sometimes having these vulnerable conversations with our women counterparts give us that venting space, but it doesn't help in the moving the needle forward in the solution space, because what I'm actually struggling with is fundamentally different than what you can maybe offer me,
Even the understanding, like they wouldn't fully be able to, which is one of the struggles.
Exactly. And so I'm just having almost like a sobering thought almost, like I just feel like maybe we're asking the wrong questions, even us on this podcast, is it men not talking, or is it men not being able to start the conversation themselves, be vulnerable to get vulnerability back,
Right. And I mean, sneaky little plug there for a future experience we'll be bringing to the podcast. I love that. And I think that you did that by accident, but I was sitting there like, does this guy want me to go there? Does he want me to share what we're going to do? And then we're not going to, but we do have something that's going to be really powerful. That's going to speak to exactly what he just spoke to. And I think that what he just did there was he gave himself and me more context as to why we're going to do it. The why just grew way stronger to what's coming. So that's exciting. That is really, really exciting. And I think that it really speaks to the space, right? It speaks to the space around one of the biggest reasons why this is such a difficulty for us. What's the space? Where's the space? How supportive is the space in the ways that we might need? And I think that I got it twisted a lot because I grew up around women, that women would have the right answers for me, but they tried. And I think in many ways they were able to supply what I needed to an extent, but there still wasn't, like, I was still ostracized. Like I'm a man. I am like you said, fundamentally different. And so there are so many missing components, like discipline or even strength. Like, this is the hilarity of it all, is like I was closed off from men, but the experiences, the feedback that I would get would be, I guess, not masculine qualities that I was probably looking for as the advice or the support or the feedback or the listening. Like, it wasn't that. So I was only getting really the other side. So there was an imbalance. So then I almost needed it more, which I think is also the other side of it. But anyways, I don't want to add anything more to what you said, because I think it needs to just live in that. And then knowing that we have something exciting coming ties it all in a beautiful loop. I think that where we want to take it is 2 more questions. But I want to ask you this one because I've already addressed this. I want to see what your thoughts are. The question revolving around vulnerability is, why is a man weak if he is suffering from mental illness? And I spoke to my experience a little bit about, like, struggling to really grab hold of that narrative, like, or I guess apply it to my experience, because it didn't really come up for me. But it's a huge one. Why is a man weak if he is struggling with mental illness or struggling at all? So when you were going through your experience, was weakness a factor? Like, did it come up for you as a challenge or a narrative that you believed was part of the problem? And if it did, like, was there anything about it that made you feel weak?
Yeah, I think that it's a great line of questioning. And I think with all the stigmas that are going on in the world, I think you should always really ask yourself, like, am I just embodying that because that's a narrative? Or is it true to my experience? You know, and I think that that's across the board with anything that you see online. Like, I think there's a lot of things that you can go out there and like read, and because you've heard it so many times, you can start to believe that, yeah, that was one for me. But it's like, was it? You know? So I love that you actually like reflected on that for real. But I do think that it did feel that way to me, and not from like a weak from society perspective. I'm going to reframe this. I just always believed in like physical and mental strength. You know, physical strength is very obvious, being able to, you know, move physically through the space and hold your own. But to me, during those times, it felt like I was, you know, when I was going through my mental illness, it felt like I was working out mentally and failing every single day. It was like, you are mentally weak. You can't, like, you are failing these workouts. Every single day you come in here and you fail to your mind, you know? And so that failure did lean towards me feeling weak, you know, like that was a language that I think I embodied. And it really did feel like I had a weak mind. You know, it felt like I had a mind that, when it comes to like mental toughness and mental fortitude, and in so many ways, I had like such a strong mind, you know. It almost like, the way it felt like to me was like I was going through a catastrophic injury, you know, like I had a strong mind and it was good. And it got me through a lot of stuff. Like from 18 to 25, it was like, I would say mental toughness was one of my attributes. Perseverance, mental toughness. I feel like that would have been a way to describe me, you know. But then I had this like massive injury. And when I had the injury, I stopped believing that I could like get back from this injury. Like, it started to really feel like, am I ever going to get back to like game shape? You know, am I ever going to get back to the strength that I had? You know, but it was such a fall from, you know, where I was, that it felt like, it almost felt like an injury that you couldn't reverse. You know, like I felt like that was my new playing field, you know, and it was that overwhelming. And it was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. You know, I didn't know how to, at the time. It was just so, I don't know if you've ever been really good at something, you know, and then all of a sudden you're not good at it anymore. There is just like that fear of like, am I ever going to be good at that again? You know, and then there is the expectation that like, but I was really good at this, you know, and it's almost like it works against you in so many ways. But I mean, the Twitch thing hit me really hard because I'm in Sydney, Australia now, you know, and if you've heard my story before, it was like that injury happened in this city. You know, that injury happened here for me. And I remember being so alone. And I remember being on Bondi Beach, you know, just the scene couldn't have been any more beautiful, you know, sunny, soft sand, blue waters. And yet it was so dark. My reality was so dark. And the injury felt so permanent. And I think when I heard about Twitch's passing, I had a bad day. Had a really bad day because I was like steps away from the place where I had felt the worst I've ever felt in my life, and was considering doing something about it, you know, and hearing about someone like Twitch, who I remember, it wasn't Twitch that was in my mind at the time, but in so many ways it was him. You know, I remember sitting in these negative thoughts thinking, if I could just get my charisma back and I can just be positive, and if I could just love life again and live with passion, if I can just get to that place, then these thoughts will go away. If I can just get here, these thoughts will go away. And what I was humbled by hearing about the tragedy of Twitch is, even when I was in that place, I had the wrong destination. Because here was Twitch at the destination I thought I would find peace at. And he was still in the same dark place I was. So here I am in the midst of my illness, thinking about a guy like Twitch, saying, if I can get to where he's at, I will be okay. And yet he's sitting right beside me with the same illness. And it makes me stop thinking about things in destinations. It's not a get to here and you're going to feel this. It's not a once you accomplish this, this will go away. And I think as men, that is like how we decipher things. If I get this girl, this will go away. If I get this job or I hit this financial number, like we have this weird association with destinations. Like if I get to X destination, everything I'm feeling will go away. And the problem with that is that we then prioritize getting to the destination instead of actually like facing the problem. You know, and we really numb ourselves out until we get to said destination. And I hope what we can learn from the recent incident is that you can have the destination and still be in the same spot. So focus on addressing the problem and not running to something else. You know, and it's hard work. I'm not saying mental health is easy, but what I like about, I've never called it an injury before, and I've never given it like a space like that, but it's really resonating with me because the injury happened in Sydney. And if someone asked me like, how are you doing now? I would say, I'm still in the rehab process. I'm still rehabbing that injury. But I am having a lot more grace for my progress. I'm having a lot more grace and patience for showing up and being kind to myself and understanding that like I will be that guy again and I can get there again and I don't need to be that guy right now, and I can allow for rebuilding the foundation in a way that's stronger than I built it before, but it might take longer. And having delayed gratification and not comparing myself to others and really living in my own lane and understanding that I had an injury, which means I can't just go 100 miles an hour. I have to understand you've gone through an injury. And when you can understand that you are healing and that you are rehabbing and you can sit in that framework, well, then you're not so focused on trying to just kill it. You're focusing on making sure that this injury doesn't happen again. And that is, you know, where I'm at and where it lives. And I went back to this place that I sat for a while, contemplating some of the most horrible thoughts I've had. And I'm proud that I could go back to that same seat, sit there, and not be so caught up in the idea of like, I think what I would want is to go back there and be like, aha, you thought you could get me, you know, and you want to get back to a point like that where something was really bad and you get back and it's almost like the proved you wrong moment, you know, like I'm bigger than I thought. And I went back there and it was just like, no, it's still there, but fuck, I'm proud of how far you've come, you know? And it's like, to be proud of progress is a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing, because it's not complete. And I know it's been years since I've sat in that seat with those thoughts, but fuck, what a 180 from where I was. Still got so far to go, but it felt like maturity to me, you know, to be sitting in a place and not want the trophy, but be happy that I made the tournament, you know, and that we can still win a trophy and it will come. You just have to keep believing in the habits and the routines and the conversations that you're having and the people that are surround you. And, yeah, it's, yeah.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Those moments. And you see it different every time and you become more aware of it in a different way every time. And, you know, I'm so grateful that the audience got to hear all of that from you. Because, like you said, fuck, it's weird to be proud of progress. And it's confusing. It doesn't make sense. Because the result's not there. So for what? And I think I am reminded, and I hope that you as a listener are reminded that in so many ways, the progress is so much more to be proud of than whatever result that we are looking for. It's potent. Absolutely potent. That was raw. So
appreciate you holding that space, man.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? This is, you know, I like that you said that too. I meant to say this earlier. So much of this conversation hasn't been just vulnerability being shared. It's also been a masterclass in a holding space. And that's one thing that I think goes missing in our conversations is that we're holding space for each other through this process, every single conversation we have. And we are staying open and curious to the other's perspectives and opinions and also experiences. And we're not interjecting. We're not trying to tell the other one what their experience is or isn't. And we're also just listening. And I think that can help us understand what this is like to do this in the real world is by listening to these conversations and be like, okay, you know, Anwar shared this crazy deep story and he said nothing. Kyle said absolutely nothing the whole time. I feel like I have to say something. I feel like I have to say, oh, it's okay. Or like, oh, you know, but you got through it. Or like, oh, you know, like I have to really interject myself so that, for many reasons, but what we're trying to remind you is that vulnerability just wants space. It doesn't want solutions. It doesn't want anything really more than just space. And it can be difficult, but we'll lead the way. We'll hold that space in this. And so I really want to touch on that. I think that that's an important part about men's mental health and vulnerability. And even, you know, this concept with Twitch in many ways, like who was or wasn't listening. And also maybe he just didn't feel like he had the space to do so because listening is a difficult challenge. It's a skill. So to kind of end the conversation, you think we should go to the finale or should we take on this last question around the experience of Twitch?
I think we can probably take on the last question and then kind of lead into the finale if that's what you want to do. If you're comfortable with that.
Let's do it. Yeah. So we talked about at the beginning how It's the same outcome, but it's a different story and it's a different impact. And with a different story and a different impact comes a different lesson, a different understanding, and a different opportunity for personal reflection around where we are at in our own lives, where we could be better, where we may be struggling, and what the state of our lives is and how we view these experiences, because we're growing from them each and every time. And even if we don't entertain conversations, I believe that you're still shifting in ways internally that you're not fully 100% aware of. So there's always a new perspective from experiences like losing such an icon in the world like Twitch. And the question we want to finish with, so we're going to pose it to you as a listener, is what are you taking from this experience? So there's more than just someone passing. There's more than just, suicide rates. There's more than just a celebrity. There's more to this, and it's unique to you. So we'll answer the question, but I want to encourage you to do the same. What are you taking from this experience? And in what ways is it hitting you differently than others? In what ways is it actually different? So have that conversation, and we'll provide some maybe opportunities to extend that. So I'll start in what I'm taking from this experience. And my answer is unexpectedly simple in that it feels like it's time to normalize suicidal ideation. And I say that specifically because of how long I spent feeling like that was something was wrong with me for having thoughts like that I was broken, and that how shitty of a job am I doing that I can't even not think these thoughts. And so that's what I mentioned. I didn't talk about them. I wasn't able to move through any of the stigmas. And it took me a really long time to get to a position where I felt like I could share it. But I had to be so far beyond it to consider it. Not to talk about it, just to consider it. And as I have moved through this men's mental health space, I've been a part of a lot of groups. We have this podcast. We have a lot of conversations now because of what we've started here. I am realizing that it's not just men, it's also women and just the general population, how radically normal and often a human considers what death might be like. It is a natural curiosity because it is the one thing we will never understand. We will never know. So the idea of having thoughts around that, in my opinion, is the human condition. And why I'm so on this right now is because I wish I had that. I wish I had someone saying, yeah. Like, oh, you had thoughts about, isn't that crazy that we do that? Like, how wild is it that our thoughts go there? Because for me, that's really fucking cool. If one person had said that, my entire experience would have been different. But they're not, because suicidal ideation has been this patting, coddling, oh no experience. And yet we all do it. So it's very odd to me. So for me, I think it's time to normalize it, make it very much just a part of conversation. Like, can I have a conversation with a friend and just, isn't it crazy that we die? How do you think you'd go? Have you ever, I had this crazy thought the other day, I might fall off the deck, then what? I don't know. I was driving the other day and I thought, what if I don't stop? What happened? Would I die? I'm not sure. One could call that suicidal ideation, which I did, because I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with me for thinking this? Like, who thinks of not stopping? So I was beating myself up. But for me, it's like, that sounds to me like a natural curiosity of the human condition. And yes, it's around death, but what's the problem? What's wrong with death? Why are we so on death is the worst thing to exist in this world? It's a part of the human. It's happening whether you want it or not. So if I'm thinking about it, that shouldn't be a problem. Now, I understand that there's limits to that and that I am speaking directly to suicidal ideation. I'm not speaking beyond that. So I don't want to get that twisted. What I want to ensure is that we are accepting parts of the human and not dissolving or diagnosing or demonizing the fact that that is real and that happens for millions of people if not the entire population. So this conversation and this experience with Twitch for me, I don't know what it is, but it's like it's one of the gateways to maybe start talking in my head, is to how can we get this to a space where this is just, yeah, you did. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. It's wild. Isn't it wild? Instead of like, oh my God, are you okay? What's going on? Is everything okay in your life? Like, it's this whole big ordeal for me. And so I think that there's parts of it that we can, start to shift, and just, it's going to ask us to be uncomfortable as shit. Right. Which uncomfortability do you want to deal with? Someone who's demonized the shit out of it and then ends up doing it, or the uncomfortability of moving through a conversation with someone around it, not making them feel like a fucking alien.
Mm-hmm.
And rant. Period. That's my takeaway from this abrupt experience, an eye-opening experience from Twitch passing. And this is why I said, and we said, it changes every time, because I haven't had these thoughts before. I don't know if you want to speak to that, but you can. If not, just jump into, what you take from Twitch passing, because I know yours has grown and evolved as well.
I mean, I think you said that. I don't need to touch that at all. I think that that's well said, well articulated, and I would challenge people to take that on and really consider it. It's almost similar to the men's health conversation that we're having. It's like you find out that many people that are struggling with erectile dysfunction, you realize, oh, okay, you calm down. It's like there's a grace in honoring the human experience that you speak to there that I think is should be explored by most people listening. My biggest takeaway with this the Twitch thing is just the preconceived idea of what depression looks like. And that was the biggest thing that hit me in the face. And I try to highlight that in my post. I know there's a lot of people on Instagram that probably just scrolled by and went, "Oh, Anwar's smiling. He looks good." And kept it moving, have no idea what the post is about, and it's almost like I did it intentionally. I wanted to give, I even, try to make the caption very what's behind the smile. I kind of try to bait people in, because this is what we're just right swiping past,
Yeah.
A smile, white teeth. Oh, he looks happy. Right swipe. Just keep it moving. But meanwhile, that smile is hiding so much. And the irony in that picture, I chose it specifically, is I posted that when I was as I'm getting off a social media post. I used that photo. I put it in my story. I said, I'm getting off of social media. Call me if you need me. Yada yada yada. And that was the picture that I used. And I was getting off of social media for a reason. So I'll leave it at that. I wasn't getting off of social media because I was fired up about life. So that smile was hiding a lot in real time. That was a real smile that was faking the funk, So when I came across that picture, I was like, wow, I need to use this, because in this picture, I'm actually doing what I'm talking about. I'm hiding what I'm actually going through. So I think that was the biggest thing, about this situation. And the biggest takeaway for me was just on a personal level was we as human beings are always going through stuff, and we project what we're going through on others all the time. And I think that for me, I want to be more conscious of how I project onto other people. And I want to be more conscious of, I know we always say this, but you truly never know what someone's going through, and my really good friend, put it in very layman's terms. She said, we got to stop being shitty to each other. We really need to stop being shitty to each other, because that little one moment you had, or that 2 moments you had that week, or that person that you said something horrible to, I don't even want to get started on online. Just think about what's going on online, and then think about what people could maybe be going through. And just for a second, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it at all. I hate how simple some of this stuff sounds, but it's like, let's be kinder to each other. Let's stop being so shitty, and let's honor this real experience that we're going through, you know, and then stop conforming to stigmas and societal norms and ideals and all this crap. Because at the end of the day, memento mori, like, you're born, you have life, and you die. So let's not manufacture our own death because of this experience. We're here to live, and we were meant to enjoy, and struggle is part of life, but we're getting a little bit too comfortable in advocating that struggle is what life should be. And that pivoting and transitioning and change and is, you shouldn't do that. No. Just, you're struggling. That's right. Life is just a bunch of struggle. And if you're not succeeding, then use alternatives, find another way. But yeah, you know, I just want to end that with, we could go on, and you can hear the passion, but yeah, we just got to be kinder to each other, and be aware of the fact that not all smiles are even, and you never know what someone's going through. So let's keep that in our heart as we continue to live through this life. And as a passing word to Twitch, he was like the first person I remember watching. So I think he can dance. I've always kind of had a little bit of a dancer in me, I would say. Never really took it seriously enough to want to like go into classes and stuff. I did one time. That's a story for another day. But he was kind of that person who I just love what dance represents in this world. You know, it's just this authentic movement to whatever is happening, you know. And I just feel like when I'm dancing, I can never really be wearing a mask, you know, because it's just so raw. It's such an authentic way of being able to express. And I've always loved it. And I've loved the art of dancing. And I can genuinely say watching Twitch on that show was like just someone I really, really admired, someone I wanted to be like. And one thing at the time I was really struggling with was, you know, I was faking my personality a lot, and not in like a negative way, just trying to fit into my environment. You know, like I was just always constantly trying to, you know, strip who I was to fit in a better way, you know. And what I loved about watching him was like, he was just 100% Twitch all the time. And he would just like do contemporary, and then he would do jazz, and then but he still looked like a football player, a basketball player. And it was just the first time visually I like accepted that, like, you can hold your integrity of who you are as a person and then do things, you know, and the things that you do don't change the makeup that you have, you know. Like, it was just such a cool thing for me to be like, oh damn, I can just be me. And then like, because I did that doesn't change who I am. I can just, you know, he's a hip hop artist that does all these other things, and he's funny, and he's charismatic. And there was just a lot of his personality that like I always wanted to embody, and I wanted to become, and I liked and I admired. And so, you know, I appreciate him for all the laughs he gave me, all the times where he gave me something to look up to, something to aspire to, and for teaching me that you can be who you are and try a bunch of stuff. You know, you can be a black guy that likes hockey, or you can be, you know, you can have an afro, and, you know, just you can be who you are, and you can like things that you like, and that's not going to change, you know. It's not going to define you or change you, you know. So it was the first time I got to visually experience that, and he was the catalyst for me understanding that. And yeah, so, you know, a nod to him. I hope you rest in peace, and, you know, you find peace in wherever you are. And yeah, who you are will be forever lasting, and I'll definitely carry a bit of you with me, and in the way that I think that joy and passion looks. So yeah, I just wanted to say that as a passing comment.
Beautiful. Incredible send off, which gives us an opportunity to finish this podcast with a moment of silence for Twitch. So we'll take the next few moments just to reflect on his experience and him passing and give him that honor. And if you have anyone in your life that has passed from experiences like this, or even just passed in general, we want to offer you that same space of reflection. So we'll take another moment of silence for the person you have in your mind. That brings us to the end of the episode. We told you it was going to be great. We got into a lot of deep stuff, and we were able to honor an incredible human being who has graced this earth with their presence. So thank you for joining us. We hope you got some value out of this. I know we did, and we are incredibly grateful to be able to have this space and for have to all of you witness us through this process. So thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe, download, let us know in the comments what you thought about this episode, or maybe if you have a send off to Twitch, we'd love to see that in the comments below. If you are following on YouTube, and if you are watching this, listening to this on any platform, we have released the full video episode on YouTube, so it's available. You can subscribe there for other episodes that we have our guests on. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. Men, we see you. We hear you. Shit, are we ever standing tall with you in this arena of misunderstood masculinity? We'll see you in the next episode.